All year, all I've been hearing was that Starfield was it. Instant game of the year. Even after we got banger after banger, all I heard was that all roads led to Starfield. No matter how good Zelda was, no matter how amazing of an experience Baldur's Gate 3 was, none of it would compare to the glory of Starfield. It was going to be a game that every gamer would get lost in. And the pitch was simple, guys. Starfield was essentially going to be Skyrim in the stars. And when I heard that, thus began my own preparation. The night before its launch, I bid my loved ones farewell because the next day, I would embark on the greatest adventure in all of gaming, that being Starfield. What did I actually experience? Nothing close to that. Guys, forget game of the year. This game has been painfully mid on every level. If this game somehow gets nominated for game of the year, I'm gonna completely lose faith in the system. And if by some miracle, Starfield wins game of the year, that's it, guys. I'm retiring. I'm out of gaming, man. I just have no place here. To my editors, you have the YouTube channel, and I guess my Twitch channel will just give it a less. But after spending so many hours in this game, guys, there is no way in hell Starfield is remotely in the same conversation as some of the game of the year contenders as of now. Now understand, guys, I am nothing personal against Bethesda or Starfield. On the contrary, I grew up playing Oblivion. I fell in love with Skyrim. I got completely burnt by Fallout 76, but that's whatever. It happens. We got over it. But what I do have a problem with is the countless comments leading up to the launch of Starfield that this game will wipe out the competition. And I was actually gonna go on my way. I wasn't gonna put out this review, but that same comment kept smacking me in the face while I was streaming this game, every time I looked on Twitter, or whatever the hell we call that site now. Regardless, everywhere I looked, I still saw those same comments. And I feel morally obligated at this point to set the record straight, to not lead gamers astray. So for those folks, I kindly ask that you take the next 10 minutes and open thy assholes and allow me to insert my opinion. Now, I don't want this video to be spoiler heavy, but I did finish the game and we did New Game Plus. And before somebody asks, oh, you just did the main storyline? No, I did your side quests as well. With that being said, though, we get some of the basics out of the way. I do want to mention that I don't care about the politics. I also don't care about console wars. I own every console anyways. I primarily play PC and all of this gameplay is on PC. And as for credentials, considering that this conversation is surrounding Game of the Year, I have played pretty much every banger this past year, except for Redfall. We skipped over that one. But every banger this year we have definitely played. And it's just been one of those years, man. I don't think we're ever gonna have a year as great as this one. We will be telling our grandkids about the year of 2023 and the constant amazing games that came to us. But I can promise you this, Starfield won't be part of that conversation. At least not for me. Now, some of the basics out of the way narratively for this game, just so we can just set everything up. I'm not gonna spoil too much. There will be a section at the end though that does get into the New Game Plus section, which will be spoiler heavy. But don't worry, I'll warn you before we get there. But essentially, this story starts off with you being a humble miner who essentially gets sent into a shaft by yourself. You touch some icky called the artifact. You then proceed to have a DMT trip, and thus your journey begins. Now, first I want to point out that this is not necessarily the worst intro. Let's be quite real. The intro for Oblivion was just like you in a prison cell with the Emperor running past you, and you happen to just be hitching a ride out of prison, which to some extent was pretty cool. Skyrim's intro was actually really good, with the intro of the dragon, everything going to shit. Same concept though, you're pretty much breaking out of prison, or in this case, breaking out of execution. Starfield is a lot more mild. I think the main portion of this intro is just to kind of get you on board with the whole mining aspect in this game, and then to immediately shuffle you onto the main story if you so wish. Which takes me to the pain point number one, gameplay. When I think of games this past year that really nailed the gameplay aspect, there were a lot of them. Say what you want about Final Fantasy 16, gameplay was fantastic. The amount of combos you could pull off in that game literally made it feel like you yourself were performing those combos. Remnant 2 had some of the best gameplay this past year, with both fantastic boss fights and weapon diversity that had me falling in love with it in my very first play session. Starfield is about as casual as it gets, but as for its shooter standards, this one falls behind for me, guys. Nothing about it screams to get good. Yes, in our death counter at the bottom left hand of the screen, it says we've died a lot, but let me be real, 90% of those deaths were actually in ship battles. It was actually wild because it seems like Bethesda took all the difficulty and just stacked it into ship battles. If you do not have the right ship, you will get wrecked. However, the gameplay engagement between enemy AI and myself was laughable. You would get bullet sponges that would just occasionally freeze up. Nothing about these fights were mechanic heavy or challenging. And listen, I'm not coming in this asking for like Dark Souls with guns. I know that's like Remnant 2's thing, but there's literally a mod available right now that exists just to amp up enemy AI. You've got players literally downloading mods to make the game harder. Now, the FPS aspects of the game were overpass, but by no means was it bar setting. I will say this though, some of the weapons are truly unique. However, the gameplay loop and taking on enemies just seems so one-dimensional. And again, everyone's gonna say that's just the Bethesda way. But after so many years and waiting so long for this game and seeing that it was a first-person shooter, I was expecting more. I literally brute forced my way through everything in this game. And before someone says, well, that's your fault, understand guys, one of the best things I experience in gaming is when the game decides to check me. When it suddenly puts a wall up and says, hey, get good. And the only area where Bethesda pushes the envelope on gameplay is in ship battles. And again, like I said earlier, if you didn't have the right ship, you would get shredded. There was actually a moment where I proceeded to do the Mantis quest just to get that legendary ship, which was absolutely necessary to continue the mission I was on. Or at least it made it a lot easier. And that's something I'm okay with. I'm okay with the game putting a wall up and making me struggle. It's the same reason we get addicted to gameplay loops of Soul games. However, that feeling of accomplishment never came from me while playing Starfield. I didn't have that moment of slaying out that I was like, yo, I just did that. I just pulled that off. Everything just kind of ran together. Even the sections where we had like a little mini boss that was somewhat different, where there was like some alien, for the most part, everything felt extremely plain. And enemy AI overall seemed to share that in common. Where is that moment where you've gathered all the Infinity Stones to take on the baddest of the bad? There wasn't. I never had that moment from start to finish with Starfield. There was no abomination from Remnant 2 that we had to prepare the entire game for. Now, many of you are gonna say, well, that's just the way Starfield is. That's Bethesda's formula, and I'll agree. Like I said earlier, this isn't supposed to be some new mechanic change, and I kind of baited myself with this, considering that this game was a first-person shooter. I was just expecting more out of the gameplay here. And we've brought up issues surrounding Destiny 2 before, but its gameplay is unmatched. Its FPS mechanics are second to none. But I will also admit that comparing Starfield to those games is unfair. When we talk about Starfield and Bethesda titles in general, we need to square it up where its strengths lie, and that is in its RPG aspects. Now, what makes a good role-playing game? You know, I thought I knew the answer to this, but I've been ruined. You see, I used to be an adventurer, which tastes like you, but then I took an arrow to the dick, and that arrow was Baldur's Gate 3. You see, Starfield could have possibly stood out in the year 2023, or even in the third quarter of this year, if Baldur's Gate 3 did not exist. And I know everyone's gonna say, Cross, it's two completely different games. It's an RPG, man. Talking role-playing here, fellas. Now, to be quite honest with you, BG3 flipped every RPG on its head. It presented elements I didn't even know could exist in games, with every decision you make in a game having consequences, and I mean major consequences. The issue with Starfield is that those consequences were just not present. There were a few instances where a decision would be impactful, but its direction was so easily projected that a toddler could pick up where it was going. It was as if the narrative team didn't have faith that our demographic could possibly digest a complicated plot or understand the consequences that are taking place. Now, I know someone's gonna ask, Cross, give us an example of these so-called major consequences. You see, guys, in Baldur's Gate, I was trading with a lady one day. She was up in the price substantially, north of 1,000%, and I took it personally. And I proceeded to slay her for her egregious pricing. Now, this obviously made the surrounding villagers upset, and they proceeded to attack me. And like an evil maniac, I wiped that outpost straight off the map. Now, fast forward to a day and a half later, and I'm not talking in-game time, I'm talking real time. I'm at the gate of the region's boss, and I was getting destroyed. Every time I proceeded to go into this castle, I was met with incredible resistance. I could get nowhere near the boss without my main character dying. And it turns out, the reason this encounter was so difficult was because the outpost I had slayed a day and a half before was the outpost of people that would have been helping me in this fight. But they weren't there. And they weren't there because I had killed them. In a moment of a power high, I had killed the very people who would have helped me. And now I was being incredibly humbled by my action. Ultimately, I ended up backing my game up to a previous save to try and rectify this. But back to the point, Starfield never had these dire consequences. It seemed like for the most part, I got the outcome I was looking for. And the alternative outcome didn't seem like something worth exploring, even if it existed. In a world where Baldur's Gate 3 exists, Starfield's RPG elements felt elementary. Now, before you decide to jump on me and say, Cross, why are you comparing these two games? Keep in mind, you picked this fight first. You nominated this game as your champion as Game of the Year. I have my contenders. I'm actually very torn on 3 games. But if you're gonna square up with the best of the best, you better be bringing it. And on the RPG side of things, Starfield did not bring it. Now, despite the narrative being lacking, I will say that the side missions, or one of them in particular, really was good. And that's the Crimson Fleet story. Now, everybody has really paraded this as being like the best quest line ever. But come on, let's be real. It's good in Starfield. But we're not talking like Thieves Guild good. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at Skyrim through rose-tinted glasses. All I'm saying though is that this quest line was good in comparison to what else Starfield had to offer. The problem is that most of the missions throughout Bethesda feel like fetch quests. Feels like something you would get in an MMORPG where it's like, yo, go here, interact here, touch this thing, boom, you're done. The RPG side of things are just lost. And look, I'm not saying that you don't get great rewards from these quest lines. The rewards are definitely worth it 1000%. All I'm saying is that the RPG aspects, the immersion, it just wasn't there for me. Pretty much on every level while playing Starfield. There's literally a moment where assassins come after you while doing the Crimson Fleet quest when you enter Gal Bank. You kill all these guys, even the guard. I literally was outside and I just killed the guard. Yet I was able to go inside and still take the codes? What? The wealthiest bank in all the galaxy, and this is the security we got? It just didn't make sense. I was dying to feel like I had some level of autonomy at different points of quests. There was literally a moment where I boarded a ship to kill a guy on board that I was sent to kill. I persuaded the crew to betray him. This was actually pretty funny because they literally killed him right in front of me. But then I decided to betray them. Now you're probably wondering, why would you do such a thing? That doesn't even make sense. You see, that's the beauty of it. If you are willing to actually double cross one of your crewmates, then you are not worth surfing the stars. And what did we get? What was the consequence to this? Literally the UC commander being like, no, bad, don't do that again. UC was literally like, we had friends on that ship that you killed. And I was like, oh yes, spicy baby. This whole place is about to flip. Major consequences incoming. But outside of a single slap on the hand, 2 dialogue lines later, it was like, it never even happened. Now, this isn't all too different from Bethesda's formula. I know this from previous Bethesda titles and other quest lines. This is pretty much in line with what Bethesda has always done. But it's 2023. And yes, I was expecting more. So if the role-playing side of things doesn't grab you though, don't worry. Bethesda's bread and butter has always been its exploration, right? You remember the satisfying feeling that you felt when walking through one end of Tamriel to the other, when uncovering everything in this vast land. One of my favorite things back in Skyrim was going into a dungeon, coming right back out of it, and then finding another place to go right back in. It was exploration crack. Yes, there were a few loading screens, but the immersion was perfection. You took this vast continent and you explored every piece of it. Now here recently, I feel like the best game this year on the exploration side of things is Zelda. And Zelda Tears of the Kingdom actually took Breath of the Wild's formula and upped it by 3. Literally 3, guys. They gave you a Sky World, the main world, and then the underworld. You thought Breath of the Wild was big. Tears of the Kingdom took exploration and dialed it up to 11. And having this seamless level of exploration allowed us to just get lost in the world. Fellas, Starfield never had that for me. Never. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because the planets are extremely barren and everybody's like, no, Cross. A ship, it lands. Look at that pirate ship. Ooh. Dude, that literally happens every single planet, almost at the exact same moment when you land. So you can literally tell that it's coded to do as such. I'll get into that in just a moment though, because actually one of the best aspects of Starfield was when I jacked one of the pirate ships. But on the exploration side of things, guys, everything just felt so bland. There were a few worlds that were kind of lush, but for the most part, everything felt empty. No, you can't just pick up your ship and land anywhere on the world. You can only land in a dedicated zone, and in that zone, that is where you are allowed to explore. Guys, out of everything here, this was the biggest letdown. The exploration side of Starfield sucks. What's even worse is that if you do land on a planet that is kind of cool, and you do want to explore every area on it, well, good luck, because you're now about to be walking. That's right. A game set in the future with all the most advanced sci-fi, and let me also mention space magic, because yes, space magic is also in this game. Even with all those things, you don't have a way to traverse planets? Look, I'm not asking for a sparrow from Destiny, but that would be very nice here. But something. Even Zelda had a means for you to traverse the land. And I'm not just talking about the paraglide. I'm talking you could literally build something, anything to carry you around. Starfield though, you don't have that. You just walk, mindlessly walk. And every time I bring this up, all I get told from the Starfield community is just to get the boost jump upgrade, as if this just changes the game. Are you kidding me right now? At this point, I would just be okay with a horse. At least it would be something. And considering all the crazy ship customizations you have, which I will say is one of the best things about Starfield, is the ship customization. I love it. I love that everything here really matters. Your reactor, your engines, cargo space, how many weapons you can load out. Again, Bethesda loaded the ship side of the game. But with all of those upgrades, there's not a single one that says, hey, with this upgrade, you can add a vehicle bay to your ship so that when you land with your ship, you can get on your vehicle and traverse the planet you're trying to explore. That way, there's like this intermix between two aspects of the game that feel very much separate. That means you, your character, traversing the planet, and your ship. The only thing my ship really serves as is a means for storage. And don't even get me started on inventory management in this game, it's a nightmare. But that's easily worked around. What's not worked around is having all of these planets, which really aren't that interesting, but having to just sit there and walk around for hours makes it substantially worse. Bethesda came out earlier this year and they talked about how proud they were for how many planets they are giving you, as if we were asking for 1,000 planets. Bethesda, instead of 1,000 planets, give me 10. Give me 10 huge worlds, 10 planets with lush environments and the ability to just get lost in those areas. The problem with that is that goes against what Bethesda really wants you to do, which is go and jump on your ship. They want you to customize your ship and explore space. But space doesn't even feel like an area worth exploring. Hell, that's why we call it space. It's not exactly a consolidation of life. Now, for my folks wondering, can you just fly directly to a planet? Say, for instance, you just want to go straight to that planet right there in front of you. Can you just fly to it? No. You can hit your thrusters forever and ever. You will never get there. Again, that's how this game feels pretty much everywhere. This isn't No Man's Sky. And I know everyone's defense to that is that No Man's Sky was garbage when it dropped too. But keep in mind, guys, we're talking two very different studios, two very different budget sizes. It's not like we're asking for Starfield here to rethink the wheel. This is something that has already been done by multiple other games that we expected, or at least I expected from Starfield. Overall, the immersion in Starfield was completely ruined because exploration was non-existent. I cannot express how big of a letdown this was. This was by far the biggest letdown because even though I'm not expecting like Baldur's Gate 3 level of RPG elements, I'm not expecting gameplay to rival the best of the best. I know what I'm dealing with. This is a Bethesda game, but every Bethesda title before me has completely immersed me in its world and exploration. And it's so hard to do that in Starfield when everything is a loading screen. There's never this moment where I look at my map and I'm like, oh my God, look how much I've explored on this planet. Look how much I've discovered and unearthed. All the secrets here. That is definitely a feeling you get when playing old Bethesda games. And it's definitely a feeling you get when playing most recently Tears of the Kingdom. The amount of satisfaction and dopamine that releases when you would look at that map and see every shrine that you've discovered. All the areas from top to bottom. It's a beautiful feeling. Nowhere in Starfield does it feel that way. Everything just runs into each other. The exploration side of things feel chopped up, and between loading screen after loading screen after loading screen, the immersion is ruined. Now, for my folks saying, but Cross, that's because you're trying to explore planets that are barren to begin with. You need to be on the areas that actually have content. Go into the cities. Explore those areas. Everyone paraded Neon City as being the best of the best, rivaling that of Night City in Cyberpunk 2077. Guys, outside of aesthetic, that is about the only thing it has in common with Night City. Yes, you've got people walking through the crowds, you've got stores, but in terms of scale, it has got nothing on Night City. Matter of fact, Asmongold watched a video here recently, and it was a video comparing Cyberpunk directly to Starfield. And you actually see, like, when you point weapons at folks in Cyberpunk, things happen. People react. They may run away. They may even shoot you. In Starfield, though, they just give you a look. You could shoot all around a guard, and it doesn't matter. But again, Neon City, that was the thing I was told really brought life to the game. You want to know the moment where I gave up on this game? It's when I walked into this club right here, and this is what I saw. What the fuck is this? I'm not asking for the best strippers in the galaxy to be right here, but what the fuck is this? This was the moment that I knew it was over. Now, we did an entire mission inside of this club, so I had to be around this for a good 30 minutes. And let me just say, just the overall club environment felt uncomfortable. But the only thing that made me feel like I was in a club was the music. But there was nothing organic about this. These three dancers in the middle made everything substantially worse. Like, if you love this, by all means, man, take a seat, have fun, take it all in. I'm not saying I play video games to go look at strippers, but you have this experience in Starfield, and then you have literal pole dancers in Cyberpunk. I don't know, you decide. Now, finally, we're about to enter some heavy spoiler areas. This involves the actual story. Yes, I'm gonna pretty much spoil the main story for you before we get into the one thing that can save Starfield. And yes, there is one thing that can save this game. But before we get into that, let's talk about New Game Plus and the overall main storyline. So, the main storyline, what it revolves around, the big wow in this narrative is, drumline, the multiverse. I know, a foreign concept. You never heard of it. Look, I'm not completely against multiverse, but definitely not a mind-blowing narrative. By no means. And the way it was revealed to us, it was like, oh my God, this should be the most mind-blowing revelation. But it wasn't, man. Maybe this would have been a mind-blowing narrative point 10 years ago, or even 6, 7 years ago. But considering all the films we have, all the TV shows, hell, even other games, the whole idea of a multiverse isn't exactly mind-blowing. Now, at the end of the day, it's all about presentation. And there was one mission in the game where you got to swap back and forth between one universe to another. Then you had to decide which one lives. TLDR, it doesn't even matter. That whole mission structure was one of the most confusing mission structures, not because you're going through these little portals and you're jumping back between two different realities. That was cool. Other than my screen looking the way it did when jumping back and forth, which literally made me nauseous, I could get around that. I was like, all right, this is actually pretty cool. We're about to have trippy battles. This almost reminded me of the final boss fight in Remnant 2 against Annihilation, where you were actually fighting in two different realities, and you actually had to telegraph where the attack was going from. If there was a slam attack coming from inside of one reality, that same slam attack would hit you on the outside, which means you needed to be ready to dodge as soon as you jumped. That's amazing. And I was expecting some level of boss fight here that would incorporate these mechanics. That never happened. Instead, you killed some aliens, and then when you would teleport over, you killed robots. Which, by the way, the robot thing didn't even make sense because you were literally in that reality with those people who seemed completely fine with you. And then next thing you know it, all the robots are trying to kill you. And it was funny because the lady that was there was literally like, you should save the other reality. And I was like, cool, I will. I'll save Joe or whoever the hell his name is. And then suddenly all the robots are attacking you. Like, what the hell, Susan? I thought we had an agreement. I guess not. Now, before somebody jumps up and starts explaining the lore, let me just say this. I cannot express how uninteresting this story actually is. And I'm not talking about overall. I'm talking about in this very moment. I could care less about which of these people actually live because I just met them. There's like a moment of dialogue where it's like, oh, you have to make this very daunting decision between these two people. I could care less. And other than getting lost in this area for about 20, 30 minutes, there was nothing difficult. There was no boss, no major baddie. There was no situation where it was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to really utilize jumping from one reality to the other. That never happened. Now, despite how bad that mission structure was, what was even worse was after you discover space magic. Yes, a very cool aspect in Starfield is space magic. Something we're definitely not new to. Destiny, we literally have space magic. But inside of Starfield, there are these temples that you will enter. And when you enter it, you'll see this portal in front of you trying to form. And upon collecting these spinning lights over and over, this opens up the portal. Now you may be wondering, what do you get when you enter such a portal? Are you about to enter an alternate plane when going through this portal? Surely something amazing happens. Nope, you literally teleport right outside the temple. Yes, you're given a new power. You'll probably have to fight a Starborn, but that's it, man. And I'm not saying I don't like the powers we're granted here, but just a one-to-one comparison, this has nothing on Skyrim. You remember the first time you killed a dragon and you absorbed its soul? And then suddenly, when exploring a cave, you come across this wall with words written on it, and you can feel the music. You can feel something inside of you stirring. And as you approach it, your screen begins to change. The word is literally pouring out inside of you. And then suddenly, you've obtained that word as a shout. Now, in order to actually activate that shout, you will then need to spend a soul. This was an amazing gameplay loop. None of that was here for Starfield. I I didn't feel that way at all. And even talking about how shouts worked back inside of Skyrim literally gives me chills. Just thinking about it even right now. That feeling didn't exist. Matter of fact, obtaining the powers was just annoying as hell. You bounce around, you touch these scrolly things as quickly as you can, and you simply just walk through a portal and that's it. This was terribly designed. And I know everyone's just gonna be like, but Cross, the powers are cool. Look, I'm not saying the powers aren't cool. What I'm saying is that the gameplay loop surrounding it is beyond weak. And this was one of the biggest letdowns, and I am comparing it directly to a previous Bethesda title. This was a step back in what I've experienced before in a major way. Now, finally, we need to talk about how this game ends. One of the most intriguing things inside of Starfield, and simultaneously one of the biggest letdowns, was the introduction of Starborn. Starborn are people who have passed through the Unity, which is essentially what you are trying to create. And essentially, it's this thing that allows you to be reborn. Now, this really ties into the New Game Plus and what Bethesda is so proud about. They're like, oh, this is amazing. You have New Game Plus, and every time you come back, your main story is a tad bit different. And similar like Skyrim, where you're a Dragonborn, here you are a Starborn. Now, the game eventually will push you to choose one of two Starborns to sign with, either the Hunter or the Emissary. Now, let me just mention, neither one of these figures really captured my attention. There's nothing that crazy about Starborn. They've got a cool ship that you can't steal, but you do get upon beating the game for the first time. But that's it, man. There's nothing that crazy about Starborn. And being these supreme beings that could traverse multiple realities, they sucked. There's nothing interesting or intriguing about these guys. And like, I literally sided with the Hunter just because he was a dick. I was like, at least this guy is honest. But even the last mission, man, the last mission was so weak. The final boss fight of this game literally consists of you just fighting multiple Starborn. Nothing mechanically changes here, by the way. Everything is literally the same. Kill some robots, kill some turrets, kill some Guardian Musa, and that's it. There's like a moment in this mission where you get like different glimpses of other realities. One of them is actually you dying pretty much in Vlad's arms. And by this point, I'm so fed up with the story, I just killed Vlad. I was like, look, I need to see color. I need something from this, because right now this sucks. And then the final fight is you literally taking on a few more Guardians, some duplicates of your party, and then that's it. The last objective is for you to go find the artifact. And you know what's so crazy is that I've actually seen this exact same aesthetic. Like this buried temple, this doorway reminds me so much of the labyrinth in Remnant 2. The difference being that the labyrinth was actually interesting. This was not, man. Now, my playthrough had me confronting the emissary right at the end, and there's like this moment where the emissary is hurt, saying things like, I know you're not the person I've lost all those universes ago, but my heart still breaks just the same. As if we're supposed to be emotionally attached to this character that we give no shits about. Now, I'd already upped my persuasion substantially, so I went the persuasion route. And let me just say, the persuasion inside of Starfield is so dumb. It's literally just an RNG roll, and I know that's the case for even Baldur's Gate 3, but if you think knowing the character you're talking to and the dialogue options, like picking the ones that narratively make sense, will have a greater effect, think again. Literally just an RNG roll. I've tried this multiple times with narrative points that don't even make sense, and it still passed. Regardless though, I persuaded the emissary, they pieced out, then I proceeded to take the artifacts, and then that's it. And this leads to the oh so amazing experience that I've been hearing about, the New Game Plus experience. You see, upon beating the game, guys, you can then approach the Unity. And what's inside the Unity? You're inside the Unity. Oh my God. Like, we haven't seen this before. No lie, this seems like something ripped straight out of Destiny, but it's whatever. It's supposed to blow our mind, but more so than anything, we have a decision to make. Either proceed forward through the Unity or stay in our current reality with the people we've created relationships with. And Bethesda's way of really pitching this is like, yo, before you go through, you can actually look behind you and see what happens to the people you leave behind. Like, one of my realities is that the Hunter literally kills everybody, of which I gave no shits about. I was like, all right, whatever. Do your thing, Hunter. I don't blame you. But if you do proceed, what happens is that the game resets. You lose your inventory, but you keep your stat points, which, by the way, you can't even respec. But you keep your stat points, and into the new universe you go. And in this new universe, your main storyline will be slightly different. And if you do the main story again, there will be even more differences after that. King Adalian actually put out a Twitter post where on New Game Plus 10, he went through it, and everyone at Constellation was literally him. Now, no lie, that shit's funny. But you gotta play this shitty main storyline 10 times in a row? The hell with that. Even by Bethesda standards, the main storyline line here is beyond weak. Now, with all that being said, what is the one redeeming factor about Starfield? Actually, it has nothing to do with Bethesda, but it is going to be the one thing and only thing that will save this game for me if I do actually come back to play it, which is very unlikely, and that is the modding community. You see, the other day I actually loaded up Vortex and we did try out some of the mods, and I will say those substantially improve the quality of Starfield. And these aren't even like crazy mods, but they still made a difference. One of them was an FOV adjuster, allowing me to have over 100 field of view, which definitely felt a lot better. Another one was actually a neutral LUTs mod, which just got rid of that weird color filter that I just didn't like to begin with. Another mod was actually the Star UI inventory mod, which made my inventory look substantially better and easier to manage. No lie, the modding community is amazing, man. Like truly, they're gonna be the one and only saving grace for Starfield. But even then, guys, it's missing the one thing that is needed, and that's for the game itself to be interesting. Starfield for me, guys, has been the biggest letdown of 2023. If you love this game, if you are having the time of your life, please continue doing so. I'm making this video because this is how I truly feel about Starfield. But if you're having the time of your life playing this game, I envy you. I wish I could feel what you're feeling. I wanted to. I had set aside September as being Starfield month. I was going to completely vacate life and just get lost in the world of Starfield, and that was what was pitched to us. But I have not experienced that. And what is commonly being thrown at me is that, Cross, how can you expect to experience that when you've only put 30 hours in the game? Guys, I gave it a shot. If within 30 hours this game has not captivated me, that's it, man. I'm done. I can't do it. First you told me 8 hours, then you told me 12 hours, then you told me to do some of the side quests, and then New Game Plus. No, I didn't do everything in this game. I didn't New Game Plus 6, 7, 8 times. I didn't do every side story mission because 30 hours was all that I could handle. This game is about as mid as it gets. No, it is not the worst thing in the world. It is not the worst game I've ever played, but it is far from Game of the Year.